General Hospital spoilers during the week of June 23 to 27 reveal that the preparations for the wedding of Drew and Willow are unfolding quietly but with deliberate precision, a ceremony being framed as a fresh start. A promise of healing, and a declaration of resilience after months of emotional turmoil. From the outside, it appears as though the couple is moving forward. Determined to rise from the wreckage of lost custody, fractured family bonds, and public scrutiny. Floral arrangements are being discussed in hushed tones, venues considered with discretion. And the guest list is being curated with surgical care to avoid any conflict or spectacle. But beneath the polished surface of this so-called celebration, something far more complicated and volatile is taking root. Because while Willow is preparing to walk down the aisle, she is also quietly preparing to return to court, this time with a renewed determination to fight for custody of her daughter, Amelia. In a confidential meeting with Martin, Willow has made her intentions clear. She wants to revisit the custody arrangement, reopen the case, and reclaim what was taken from her. It's a stunning decision not only because of its timing, coinciding directly with her engagement, but because of what it truly reveals. Willow may be smiling in wedding fittings and attending cake tastings, but she is far from at peace. Her agreement to marry Drew is not just about love or shared pain. It is about strategy. It is about building an alliance that will allow her to step back into the courtroom with perceived stability, support, and legitimacy on her side. And Drew, acutely aware of the optics and the opportunity, is seizing his own role in this new narrative. To Drew, the upcoming wedding is more than a romantic milestone. It is a calculated move in a larger game of control and influence. By marrying Willow, he isn't just securing her hand, he's securing his own position in a story that is rapidly unraveling around him. With his reputation under fire, whispers of manipulation growing louder, and his control over both ELQ and the Quartermain family weakening, Drew sees the wedding as a way to reposition himself in the public eye. A loving husband. A protector. A second-chance father figure. And if he helps Willow win back Amelia, he secures not only a family, but also redemption. Or at least, the illusion of it. But Willow's motivations are far less about optics and far more about survival. The loss of custody devastated her in ways few around her truly understand. It didn't just take her children, it took her identity. It stole her motherhood, her agency, and her voice. And while she appeared to accept the decision with grace, it was only a mask for a deeper fire burning underneath. The moment she stepped into Martin's office, it became clear that she was done playing passive. The new legal strategy they're crafting is aggressive, bold, and unrelenting. They will challenge the original ruling, introduce new psychological evaluations, and question the legitimacy of the prior proceedings, especially in light of Drew's support and her supposedly rehabilitated emotional state. Drew, now fully embedded in her legal team's strategy, has been offering resources, contacts, and back-channel influence to bolster Willow's case. He is treating the custody battle with the same intensity he once reserved for corporate takeovers. And though his actions are cloaked in the language of support and partnership, there's something unsettling in his commitment. He's involved in every legal meeting. He reviews every affidavit. He's even suggested subtle ways to discredit Michael, planting doubts about his parenting choices and alliances. What was once a personal issue is becoming a war, and Drew is arming himself for battle with Willow as both the weapon and the cause. At the same time, the wedding planning has taken on an eerie duality. Every step toward the altar is mirrored by a step deeper into the courtroom. Dress fittings are followed by strategy sessions. Seating charts are drawn up in the same breath as potential witness lists. And all the while, neither of them is talking about what it truly means to bring a marriage into this level of psychological warfare. The vows they will speak. The promises they will make, will they be rooted in love or in mutual desperation? Around them, those closest to the situation are starting to notice. Jason, ever watchful, has expressed quiet concern. Carly is keeping her distance, sensing that the woman Willow is becoming is no longer the gentle spirit who once cried in her arms but someone hardened, focused, and deeply wounded. Even Michael, from afar, is beginning to realize that this upcoming wedding may not be the romantic closure it appears to be, but the beginning of something far more dangerous. And yet, despite all the warning signs, the preparations continue. Florists are called. A string quartet is booked. Invitations are printed on soft ivory cardstock, sent with whispers instead of celebration. But those who know Port Charles understand that no wedding is ever as simple as it seems. Especially not when love is tangled in vengeance, and rings are exchanged in the shadows of a custody war. Willow and Drew are not just preparing for a wedding. They are preparing for a fight. A fight for power. For children. For control. And as the date approaches, one thing becomes clear: the battle for Amelia is not just legal. It's emotional. It's strategic. And it could leave more than one relationship in ruins before the vows are even spoken. Vaughn had been following the plan precisely as instructed. He'd infiltrated the animal rights group Emma was passionate about, mimicked her values, mirrored her interests, and played the part of the attentive, open-minded volunteer who happened to be at the right place at the right time. It was all meant to be a means to an end: gain Emma's trust, distract her from her growing suspicions about Professor Hank Dalton, and report back to Jocelyn with updates. But something unexpected had begun to shift beneath the surface. The more time Vaughn spent around Emma, the more his role stopped feeling like a performance and started becoming an obsession. Her curiosity, her quiet strength, her fierce independence, they were all intoxicating to him. What had begun as strategy had transformed into something far more dangerous. Now, Vaughn wasn't just pretending. He was investing. He was imagining futures. He was building an emotional architecture in his mind where Emma was no longer an obstacle or an assignment, but someone he needed. Someone he could not let slip away. That's why, instead of keeping things purely superficial, he decided to escalate. Vaughn made Emma a proposal, one that, on the surface, seemed professional and innocent, even empowering. He suggested they co-lead a new initiative for the animal rights group, expanding their outreach into social media campaigns, community engagement, and digital activism. He praised her vision, her leadership, her heart. He told her the group needed her voice at the forefront, and he wanted to help elevate it. What Emma didn't realize was that this offer was laced with something far more insidious. Vaughn wasn't empowering her, he was positioning himself closer, embedding himself into every project. Every conversation, every step she would take. By tethering his name to her cause, he was ensuring she wouldn't make a move without his knowledge, his influence. The proposal was a carefully veiled attempt to bind himself to her orbit, not as a partner, but as a gatekeeper. This wasn't collaboration, it was control. And it was the beginning of something darker. Something obsessive that Vaughn could no longer hide behind his false smiles and rehearsed empathy. Meanwhile, Jocelyn, the one who had brought Vaughn into this operation in the first place, remained unaware of just how far things had begun to spiral. She had chosen Vaughn because he was effective, charming, intelligent, invisible in all the right ways. She needed someone who could gain Emma's trust quickly and keep her distracted while she and Jason investigated Dalton's network. Vaughn had delivered. But Jocelyn had failed to notice the subtle shift in his language when he spoke about Emma, the way his updates became less about strategy and more about moments, what Emma wore that day. What made her laugh, what upset her. He wasn't gathering intelligence anymore. He was fixated. In her pursuit of Dalton. Jocelyn had overlooked the increasingly unstable variable she had introduced into Emma's life. Vaughn was no longer acting like a mole, he was acting like a man in love, or worse, a man obsessed. And Emma, trusting, driven, and emotionally isolated from the constant pressure of her own investigation into Dalton, was walking straight into the center of his carefully constructed web. Every move Vaughn made now had layers. Every compliment, every encouraging word, every helpful suggestion was part of a campaign to make himself indispensable to her. The more Emma relied on him, the more control Vaughn had. This was no longer about Dalton. This was no longer about Jocelyn's plan. Vaughn had rewritten the mission. Emma had become the goal. And Jocelyn, without realizing it, had handed him the perfect opportunity to escalate, under the guise of trust and collaboration. What makes the situation even more dangerous is how subtle it all remains. Vaughn isn't showing overt signs of instability. To the outside world, he's the model volunteer, the supportive friend, the committed ally. No one would suspect that beneath the surface. He's cataloging Emma's every move, mentally framing himself as her protector, her confidant, even her destiny. And if anyone threatens that illusion, if Jocelyn starts asking too many questions, or if Emma begins to pull away, there's no telling how Vaughn might respond. Jocelyn's strategy has already gone too far. Her effort to manipulate Emma's attention away from Dalton has backfired, giving rise to a much more personal and immediate threat. And if she doesn't realize what Vaughn has become, what she has helped create, Emma may find herself caught in a dangerous emotional storm she never saw coming. Because this isn't about strategy anymore. This is about obsession. And Vaughn is no longer pretending. He's preparing. And Jocelyn may have just opened the door to something neither of them can control. Tracy and Nina, two women often at odds and operating from entirely different spheres of influence, have found themselves aligned by a dangerous convergence of interest. What began as quiet observations and subtle doubts has now become a full-fledged alliance, an unexpected adjustment. A deliberate recalibration, and a calculated maneuver to stop the impending wedding between Drew and Willow. But beneath their polished exteriors and seemingly unrelated motives lies one explosive truth, a shocking secret capable of destroying everything Willow believes to be true. For Nina, the unraveling began when she realized just how deeply Drew had embedded himself into her daughter's life. Willow, still emotionally fragile after losing custody of her children and reeling from a breakdown she barely survived, was now leaning on Drew for stability. But to Nina, Drew was anything but stable. He was manipulative, strategic, and worst of all, obsessed, not with love, but with control. Nina's attempts to reconnect with Willow had all failed, every phone call was blocked, every gift returned. Every olive branch burned before it could be accepted. The more she tried to protect her daughter, the more Drew seemed to tighten his grip. So, when a chance arose to partner with someone who could match Drew's ruthlessness, Tracy Quartermaine, Nina seized it without hesitation. Tracy had her own reasons, though she kept her cards close. She'd been watching Drew with growing suspicion, especially as he began consolidating power within ELQ and aligning himself with the Corinthos family. She knew the signs, his need for influence, his manipulative charm, the way he wrapped himself in sympathy to mask his calculated ambition. Drew was playing a long game. And his marriage to Willow wasn't a romantic gesture, it was a business transaction, a PR move, and a psychological ploy all wrapped into one. Tracy understood better than anyone what that kind of union could do to a family's legacy. And she wasn't about to let it happen without a fight. The secret they held wasn't just hearsay. It was documented. Verified. Dangerous. It involved a night between Nina and Drew, buried in secrecy, laced with motive, and painted over with lies. It also involved legal misconduct. Drew's manipulation of medical and legal documentation to bolster Willow's upcoming custody battle over Amelia. If exposed, these revelations could not only ruin the wedding but leave Drew open to criminal investigation and professional disgrace. More than that, it could devastate Willow, who trusted him blindly and leaned on him as the last remaining pillar in her fractured world. Tracy and Nina understood the cost of detonating such a bomb. Public fallout. Personal shame. A war that could splinter Port Charles into factions once again. But to them, the risk was necessary. Tracy wanted to protect the Quartermaine name from scandal and takeover. Nina wanted to rescue her daughter before it was too late. So they set their plan in motion, not with reckless haste, but with the precision of two women who knew exactly what they were doing. Every detail was accounted for. The evidence prepared. The timing orchestrated to align with the final stages of wedding planning. As Willow finalized guest lists and fitted her wedding dress, Tracy and Nina were finalizing press statements and meeting in shadows. As Drew charmed doctors and lawyers, they tracked down past indiscretions and lined up expert testimony. It wasn't just a takedown, it was an ambush, set to unravel everything Drew had constructed and force Willow to confront the truth at the worst possible moment. But this wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity. They believed that tearing the illusion down now was better than watching Willow crumble months or years later, betrayed and trapped in a life that had never truly been hers. And while neither Nina nor Tracy expected forgiveness, least of all from each other, they both understood the importance of doing what had to be done. Because love, no matter how painful or complicated, sometimes demanded destruction before redemption. What remains uncertain is how Willow will respond. If the truth comes crashing down on her during the wedding or shortly before, will she have the strength to walk away? Or will she cling even tighter to Drew out of desperation and fear? Will she see Nina's actions as betrayal or salvation? And will Tracy's interference be seen as wisdom, or manipulation masquerading as protection? One thing is clear, this wedding, no matter how beautifully decorated or perfectly orchestrated, is a ticking time bomb. And the countdown has already begun. Nina and Tracy have lit the fuse, not out of malice, but out of necessity, and when the moment comes, nothing in Port Charles will be the same again. The question isn't whether the truth will come out. The question is who will survive it. Sonny Corinthos finds himself at the center of an unsettling new revelation, one that signals a dangerous adjustment in the calculated moves of Jen Sidwell. What once seemed like routine manipulation from a known adversary has now transformed into something far more insidious, a deep, obsessive fixation, tightly cloaked in strategic maneuvering. Sidwell has shifted his game. And Sonny, despite his long history of battling threats both internal and external, is now facing something that feels less like a tactical rivalry and more like a psychological war fueled by obsession. This latest adjustment from Sidwell isn't just about territory or influence, it's personal. There's a new intensity in the way Sidwell targets Sonny, weaving himself into areas of Sonny's life he never dared touch before. Legal connections are being exploited, alliances are being tested, and whisper campaigns are spreading like wildfire through Port Charles. Sidwell is orchestrating something that threatens not only Sonny's reputation, but the very structure of his empire. And while Sonny has faced vendettas before, this time, the battlefield is shifting beneath his feet, and the rules no longer apply. The obsession is palpable. Sidwell isn't merely content with victory, he wants destruction. Every move he makes is deliberate, psychological, and escalating. From leaking damaging financial documents to manipulating key witnesses in upcoming cases, to planting seeds of doubt within Sonny's own circle. Sidwell's campaign has become a pressure cooker with no release valve. And Sonny, though skilled at managing chaos, senses that this isn't a typical turf war. This is personal revenge disguised as political chess, and it's spiraling into dangerous new territory. As the pressure mounts, Sonny's instincts sharpen. He begins to adjust his own strategies. Quietly gathering information, watching Sidwell's every move, and preparing for the inevitable collision. But beneath that calm exterior lies a storm. Sonny understands that if Sidwell's obsession continues to grow unchecked, it could lead to catastrophic consequences, not just for himself, but for his family, his legacy, and the tenuous balance of power in Port Charles. This isn't just a feud. It's a declaration. And the war has only just begun. Carly and Brennan now find themselves on the verge of unleashing a new wave of threats, carefully calculated, brutally precise, and laced with a shared obsession that has turned their alliance into something darkly potent. What began as a mutual interest in toppling common enemies has evolved into a volatile power dynamic, where each move is both a strategic adjustment and an act of psychological domination. Together, they've orchestrated a dangerous recalibration of influence in Port Charles. One that doesn't rely on brute force but instead on quiet coercion, controlled fear, and the art of knowing exactly when to strike. Their newfound coordination isn't just a tactical adjustment, it's a suffocating pressure campaign. Carly, always the master of emotional leverage and perception, has begun to use her insider knowledge of the Corinthos family and the Quartermaines as weapons, while Brennan, with his deep intelligence ties and covert reach, provides her with the means to carry out threats that leave no fingerprints. Together, they form a dual front of social control and systemic manipulation, with their enemies cornered before they even realize they're being hunted. But what makes this new threat so disturbing is the undercurrent of obsession driving it. Carly is no longer content with survival or reputation. She wants dominance. She wants retribution. Brennan, long thought to be merely a calculating opportunist, is now revealing something far more unnerving, an emotional fixation on control, on dismantling the lives of those who once underestimated him. Their collaboration is no longer transactional. It's become compulsive. And this compulsion has ignited a chaos they can barely contain. Whispered threats are turning into real consequences. People are vanishing from social circles. Financial accounts are being frozen. Legal cases are shifting without explanation. And most terrifying of all, secrets, deeply buried and thought untouchable, are now resurfacing one by one. No one is safe from their reach. No connection is too sacred, no alliance too strong. In Port Charles, a new order is being written, not with open violence, but with psychological warfare and absolute control. Carly and Brennan are rewriting the rules of power. And those who once mocked them as emotionally compromised or politically irrelevant are beginning to realize they may have underestimated the deadliest alliance forming in the shadows. The madness has only begun. Jason and Anna are preparing to act, and their movements signal a critical shift in the balance of power within Port Charles. What once felt like isolated pieces of unfinished business is now coalescing into a coordinated operation, driven not only by duty but by something deeper and more personal. There is an intensity simmering just beneath the surface, an obsession with justice, yes, but also a relentless need to take control of a situation that has spun far beyond reason. As whispers of corruption, betrayal, and manipulation ripple through the town, Jason and Anna are no longer waiting. They're moving. This new phase isn't just another mission. It's a recalibration of their entire approach, an adjustment born from weeks, even months, of watching their enemies evolve into something more cunning, more dangerous. Jason, long the silent enforcer, is now sharpening his strategy. He's not just relying on brute force or instincts anymore. He's learning to anticipate, to think 4 moves ahead, to strike where no one expects. And Anna, carrying the weight of her past as a WSB operative, is rediscovering the side of herself that doesn't simply investigate, but dismantles. Together, they are operating with a calculated precision that is both unsettling and necessary. The stakes have changed, and they know it. Sidwell's growing influence, Brennan's quiet manipulation, Drew's spiral into darkness, all of it has created a landscape where the old rules no longer apply. So Jason and Anna are rewriting them. They are gathering intel, forming silent alliances, and dismantling false narratives, brick by brick. And as they begin to close in on the truth, it becomes clear that this isn't just a mission. It's an emotional reckoning. There is an obsession growing beneath the surface, a need to reclaim control, to restore order not just to Port Charles, but to themselves. Anna is haunted by the chaos that Dalton has unleashed. Jason is tormented by the collateral damage of his silence. Together, their paths converge not in the name of loyalty or law, but in the shared understanding that in order to stop what's coming, they must become more ruthless than they've ever dared to be. What they're chasing isn't just justice anymore, it's a form of redemption. And the closer they get, the more it becomes clear that this operation is personal. The obsession is mutual, the adjustments are deliberate, and the war they are entering is no longer just about stopping the enemy. It's about finally confronting the ghosts they've both tried to outrun. The story is shifting, and nothing in Port Charles will ever be the same again.